6 rides, thousands of visitors. Everything looked perfect. But every hidden safety check was done by one quiet worker no one respected. She fired him without hesitation. He walked away, leaving only a notebook behind. Days later, inspectors arrived, files missing, systems failing. Then they found his records. Perfect. Complete. She looked at the pages, then at him. Suddenly, the invisible worker was the only one who mattered. Ever seen someone overlooked until it was too late? Where are you watching from? Morning mist lingered over Atlanta, sunlight glinting off metal slides as children's laughter drifted like music through Suncrest Park. Marcus Hale moved quietly along the edge of the playground, almost invisible unless someone was looking for him, and no one ever was. At 24, Marcus carried himself with a stillness that came from growing up without anyone to lean on. Tall, lean, dark-skinned, with careful eyes that missed nothing, he worked like someone who believed details mattered more than recognition. Maybe because, for him, they always had. He crouched beside the main slide, tightening a bolt that most people would never notice. His fingers were steady, practiced. Afterward, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn notebook, edges frayed, pages slightly curled, and wrote something down with precise, almost ritualistic care. Every check, every adjustment, every risk, however small. To Marcus, the notebook wasn't just a task. It was proof that he had been here, that he had done something right. Behind him, the park pulsed with life, children running, parents calling out, the distant hum of machines. But Marcus existed just outside of it, like a shadow cast by something brighter. Still writing in that thing? The voice came from behind, sharp with amusement. Tyler Reed, a coworker in his early 20s, stood leaning against a railing. Tyler was broad-shouldered, loud, with a careless grin that had gotten him through life without much effort. He had never needed to pay attention to details because someone else always had. Marcus didn't turn immediately. As part of the protocol. Tyler snorted. Protocol doesn't pay extra, man. Marcus gave a small nod, more to himself than to Tyler, and continued writing. He had learned a long time ago that explaining himself rarely changed anything. From across the park, heels clicked against pavement, measured, deliberate. Linda Whitman approached. She was in her early 40s, tall, composed, with blonde hair pulled into a tight, immaculate bun. Her white blouse was crisp, untouched by the dust and noise of the park. Linda carried herself like someone who had spent years climbing her way into control and had no intention of letting go of it. Mistakes to her weren't accidents. They were weaknesses. Marcus, her voice cut through the air, not loud, but impossible to ignore. Marcus stood up immediately. Yes, ma'am. Linda's eyes flicked briefly to the notebook in his hand before returning to his face. You're behind schedule, again. I was checking I didn't ask what you were doing. Her tone remained calm, but it carried a sharp edge. I asked why it's taking longer than it should. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not anger, not quite, something quieter. He had felt it before, many times, the feeling of being measured against something he was never meant to match. I'll finish faster, he said. Linda studied him for a second longer than necessary, then nodded once. See that you do. She turned and walked away, already done with the conversation. Tyler let out a low whistle. Man, she does not like you. Marcus didn't respond. He simply bent down again, tightening another bolt, his movements a little more deliberate now, not rushed, but heavier. He had learned to carry words like hers the way he carried everything else, quietly. The day stretched on. Hours folded into each other under the heat of the rising sun. Marcus moved from one section to another, checking, adjusting, recording, while laughter and music filled the air around him like something he wasn't invited to. By late afternoon, fatigue had begun to settle into his bones. His shirt clung slightly to his back, damp with sweat. Still, he kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking led places he didn't want to go. Near closing time, Marcus was asked to bring coffee to the management office, something outside his usual duties, but not something he refused. He carried the tray carefully, each step measured. Inside the office, the air felt different, cooler, quieter, controlled. Linda stood near her desk, reviewing paperwork. Marcus stepped forward. Your coffee, ma'am. He extended the cup. And then, Just a fraction too fast. His hand slipped. The cup tilted. Dark liquid spilled across Linda's pristine white blouse, blooming like a stain that couldn't be undone. Silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a room, but presses against it. Marcus froze. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Linda looked down at her blouse, then slowly back up at him. Her expression didn't explode into anger. It hardened. Of course you didn't, she said quietly. That was worse. Marcus swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. I can fix it. I'll pay for cleaning. No. The word landed clean, final. Linda straightened slightly, as if reasserting control over the moment. You're done here, Marcus blinked. Ma'am? I won't repeat myself. Her voice was calm, but there was no space left inside it. Collect your things. Leave. Something inside Marcus shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for him to feel it. A small crack. Not in his pride, in something deeper. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, because there was nothing he could say that would matter. So he nodded. Yes, ma'am. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Marcus turned and walked out of the office, each step heavier than the last. The park was still alive outside, lights beginning to glow, children laughing, music playing, but it all felt far away, like he had already left. At the edge of the park, Marcus paused briefly, just for a second. Then he kept walking. Behind him, unnoticed, his worn notebook lay on a metal bench near the slide, pages filled with careful handwriting, records of every unseen act of care. Waiting. The evening sky over Atlanta dimmed into a quiet gray, the park lights flickering on behind Marcus as if nothing had changed, except everything had. Marcus walked without looking back, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew exactly what he would see: laughter, motion, life continuing without him. His steps were steady, but inside, something had gone strangely hollow, like a room emptied too quickly. The rhythm of his day, check, tighten, record, still echoed in his mind, refusing to fade. It was the only rhythm he had ever trusted. His apartment sat above a narrow convenience store on a side street that never fully slept. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, casting a flickering red glow through his thin curtains. Inside, the room was small, worn, and quiet in a way that felt permanent. A single bed, a metal table, a chair that creaked when he sat. Marcus placed his keys down carefully, as if even sound needed permission here. He stood there for a moment, not moving. Then slowly he reached into his pocket, empty. His fingers paused. The notebook. He frowned slightly, retracing the day in his mind, step by step, as he always did. The slide, the bench, the office, the spill. He had left it. For a brief second, something close to panic surfaced, but it didn't rise all the way. Instead, it settled into something quieter. He exhaled. It's just a notebook, he muttered. But the words didn't convince him, because it had never been just that. Marcus sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. Without the notebook, his thoughts felt louder, less contained. The details he used to write down now circled his mind with nowhere to go. Bolts that needed rechecking, a railing that had been slightly loose, a timing issue with one of the smaller rides. He could see it all, and now no one else would. Across town, Suncrest Park carried on. Linda Whitman stood in her office, her blouse changed, her composure restored. The incident already filed away in her mind, not as a mistake, but as a correction. Problems were meant to be removed. That was how systems stayed efficient. That was how she had survived long enough to be in charge. Is the replacement in position? She asked, without looking up. Yeah, Tyler replied from the doorway, chewing gum lazily. Name's Caleb. He'll do whatever you say. Linda nodded once. Good. Caleb Dunn was 19, thin, with restless eyes and a habit of nodding before fully understanding instructions. He had taken the job because he needed quick money, no questions asked. Details bored him. He preferred shortcuts, the kind that made time move faster. Later that evening, Caleb walked through the same section Marcus had maintained for months. He glanced at a loose bolt, hesitated for half a second, then kept walking. It's fine, he whispered to himself. because it looked fine, and looking fine was enough. Back in his apartment, Marcus lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint hum of the city seeped through the walls, but it felt distant, like something happening in another life. His body was tired, but his mind refused to rest. He closed his eyes and saw the park, not as it was, but as it could become, a small failure, then another, a missed check, a weak point ignored. Marcus sat up suddenly, his breath slightly uneven. He had spent years training himself to notice what others didn't, to care when no one else cared. And now, he couldn't turn that off, even if he wanted to. He stood, pacing slowly across the room, his steps soft against the worn floor. "It's not my responsibility anymore," he said under his breath. But the words felt wrong. Responsibility, to Marcus, had never been assigned. It had been chosen, and that made it harder to leave behind. Outside, a siren wailed briefly in the distance, then faded. Marcus stopped pacing and looked toward the window, the faint red glow flickering across his face. For a moment, he considered going back, just to check, just once. But he didn't move, because going back without being wanted was a different kind of breaking. So he turned away and sat down again. Across the city, beneath bright lights and easy laughter, something small shifted out of place, unseen, unrecorded, unnoticed, and this time, no one was writing it down. A sharp wind swept through Atlanta that morning, rattling loose signs and whispering through the steel frames of Suncrest Park, as if something unseen had finally arrived. The park opened as usual, music playing, gates welcoming families, children running toward bright colors without hesitation. But beneath that surface, something had shifted. The wind seemed to linger longer than it should, brushing against metal, slipping through bolts, tracing the edges of things that had been ignored. Linda Whitman stood near the entrance, posture straight, clipboard in hand. She had chosen a darker blazer today, structured and precise, as if she could wear control like armor. The incident with Marcus had already been filed away in her mind as necessary, unfortunate but efficient. Systems didn't fail because of one person leaving. They adapted. At least, that's what she believed. A black SUV rolled to a stop just outside the gate. 3 people stepped out. At the front was Daniel Brooks, mid-40s, lead safety inspector, with a weathered face and steady, observant eyes that had spent years catching what others missed. He had started his career after surviving a ride malfunction as a teenager, an event that left him with a permanent distrust of good enough. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he asked questions, people answered carefully. Beside him walked Elena Ruiz, early 30s, sharp, efficient, with dark hair tied back and a tablet already in hand. She moved quickly, scanning, noting, calculating. Mistakes to her were patterns waiting to be uncovered. The third, a junior assistant named Mark Ellis, barely 22, carried equipment and a quiet nervousness, still learning how to see what his seniors saw. Linda stepped forward, her expression composed. "Welcome to Suncrest Park. We weren't informed of an inspection today." Daniel gave a small nod. "That's the point." The words landed softly, but they stayed. The inspection began immediately. At first it was routine. Questions, observations, notes. Then the gaps started appearing. "Maintenance log for this section?" Elena asked. Linda gestured toward a cabinet. It was opened, empty. A flicker passed across Linda's face. Quick, controlled, but real. "Still being updated," she replied. Daniel didn't respond. He simply moved on. Ride after ride, the same pattern repeated. Missing logs, incomplete records, verbal confirmations where written proof should have been. The cheerful noise of the park began to feel distant, like something happening behind glass. Tyler, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, his usual grin didn't return. Caleb tried to stay busy, moving tools from one place to another, avoiding eye contact. His earlier confidence had dissolved into something smaller, quieter. "Check the structural points on this slide," Daniel said. They approached the main slide, the one Marcus had maintained. Mark knelt beside a joint, testing it. "Slight movement here," he said. Elena tapped her tablet. "No recent inspection recorded." Linda crossed her arms. "It's been visually checked." Daniel finally looked directly at her. "Visual isn't verification." Silence. Then Elena turned toward a nearby bench. "What's this?" a notebook. Worn, familiar. She picked it up, flipping it open. Pages filled with tight, consistent handwriting. Dates, times, signatures, observations so detailed they bordered on obsessive. Adjustments logged with precision. Follow-ups noted. Nothing skipped, nothing assumed. The air changed. "What is this?" Daniel asked. Linda hesitated. "For the slide," she said finally. Elena scanned further, her expression sharpening. "This is more complete than anything we've seen today." Mark leaned closer. "It's perfect." Daniel turned a page slowly. "Who wrote it?" No one answered immediately. Then Tyler, almost reluctantly, spoke. "Marcus." The name hung there. Daniel looked up. "Where is he?" Linda's posture stiffened slightly. "He's no longer employed here." "Why?" Elena asked. "A performance issue," Linda replied. The words sounded thinner now. Daniel closed the notebook gently, as if it were something fragile. "This is the only verified record in your entire park." The weight of that settled heavily into the space. Around them, the park continued, children laughing, rides moving, but it all felt distant, disconnected from the moment unfolding. Because suddenly, the absence of one person had become visible, not in noise, in what was missing. Linda said nothing. For the first time that day, she didn't have an answer ready. And somewhere across the city, unaware of the shift he had left behind, Marcus sat in silence, while the truth, quiet and patient, finally found its voice. The late afternoon light over Atlanta softened into gold, stretching long shadows across Suncrest Park. But for the first time, the brightness felt like it was exposing something rather than hiding it. Linda Whitman stood alone near the central walkway, the same place where she had once watched everything with quiet control. Now, the park felt unfamiliar. Not because it had changed, but because she had. The laughter of children still echoed, rides still turned, music still played. But beneath it all, she could hear something else. Absence. It was not loud. It did not demand attention. But it was everywhere. She walked slowly toward the slide area, heels quieter than usual against the pavement. The notebook, Marcus's notebook, had been returned to her after the inspection. But it no longer felt like a simple object. It felt like evidence. Not of failure, but of something she had refused to see. Linda opened it again. Each page was precise. Each line, intentional. Dates aligned. Notes layered with care. There were even small observations. Things no one had asked for. Slight vibrations. Weather effects. Follow-up checks. She paused at one entry. Minor looseness detected. Rechecked twice. Secured. Monitored daily. No signature required. No recognition expected. Just done. Linda closed the notebook slowly. For the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar. Not frustration. Not control. Uncertainty. Behind her, footsteps approached. It was Daniel Brooks. "The report will be filed by tomorrow," he said calmly. "You'll need to correct all missing documentation before operations continue normally." Linda nodded. "Understood." Daniel glanced briefly at the notebook in her hand. "You had someone who knew what they were doing." Linda didn't respond immediately. "He's no longer here," she said. Daniel studied her for a moment. "That seems to be the problem." Then he walked away. The words didn't accuse, but they stayed. Linda stood there a while longer before finally turning toward her office. Each step felt heavier, not because of pressure, but because of realization. Systems didn't fail because people left. They failed because the wrong people were overlooked. Inside her office, the air felt different now, less controlled, more exposed. She sat down, placing the notebook carefully on the desk in front of her. Her phone rested beside it. For a moment, she simply stared at it. Linda Whitman was not someone who hesitated. Her entire life had been built on decisions made quickly, cleanly, without doubt. Growing up in a household where mistakes were met with silence instead of forgiveness, she had learned early that control meant survival. But this wasn't a mistake she could outpace. Her fingers hovered over the phone. Then, slowly, she picked it up. Across the city, Marcus sat by the window of his small apartment, the faint red glow of the neon sign flickering across his face. He hadn't moved much that day. Not out of exhaustion, but because movement felt unnecessary when there was nowhere to go. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. Unknown number. For a second, he considered letting it ring. Then he answered. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then Linda's voice. Marcus. The sound of his name, spoken differently this time, made something in his chest tighten. Yes, ma'am. Another pause. I'll be direct, Linda said. Her tone was controlled, but something beneath it had shifted. We need you back. Marcus didn't speak. Linda continued. Your work, the documentation, the inspections, it was essential. We are prepared to offer you a higher salary, benefits, a revised position. Each word was carefully chosen, each one measured, but for the first time, they were not enough. Marcus looked out the window, watching the reflection of the city lights flicker faintly in the glass. I see, he said quietly. Linda waited. I didn't realize, she added, the words slower now, the extent of your contribution. That was as close to an admission as she had ever come. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. For years, he had worked without hearing those words. Now that they were here, they felt late. I need time, he said. Linda exhaled softly. Of course. The call ended. Marcus lowered the phone, his hand resting loosely against his knee. The room felt the same. The city sounded the same. But something inside him had changed. Not broken, not healed, just clearer. Because for the first time, the choice was his. And back at Suncrest Park, as the golden light faded into evening, Linda remained in her office, the notebook still resting in front of her, silent, patient, undeniable, waiting not to be read, but to be understood. Morning light returned to Atlanta with a quiet clarity, the kind that made everything look the same, yet somehow impossible to ignore. Suncrest Park opened again under inspection conditions, slower, more controlled, as if the place itself had learned to breathe carefully. The music still played, but softer. The laughter still came, but more distant. Even the wind felt different, no longer restless, but watchful. Marcus stood just outside the entrance. He hadn't rushed his decision. The night before had stretched long, filled with silence and the steady rhythm of his own thoughts. He had walked the streets, replayed the years, the small moments no one else had noticed. Not the insult, not the dismissal, but the work. The choice in the end had not been about Linda or the park. It had been about whether he could walk away from what he knew mattered. Marcus stepped forward. Inside, a few employees noticed him first. Conversations faltered, then faded. Tyler straightened where he stood, his usual ease replaced by something uncertain. Caleb avoided looking directly at Marcus, his posture smaller than before, like someone who had finally understood the weight of what he didn't know. Linda Whitman stood near the central path. She saw him immediately. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus approached. Up close, nothing about him had changed. Same steady posture, same quiet presence. But something had settled inside him. Not resignation. Authority. Linda extended her hand. It was a simple gesture, one she had made countless times before in negotiations, meetings, controlled exchanges of power. But this time, it carried something unfamiliar. Recognition. Marcus looked at her hand for a second. Then he took it. The handshake was firm, even, without hesitation. Welcome back, Linda said. Her voice was steady, but not cold. Thank you, Marcus replied. No apology was spoken. None was needed, because something more important had already been acknowledged. Linda gestured slightly. There's work to be done. Marcus nodded once, and just like that, he stepped back into the park, not as a shadow moving along its edges, but as someone who understood its center. He walked toward the slide first. Of course he did. The structure stood exactly where he had left it, sunlight catching along its surface, children already lining up to climb. From a distance, nothing seemed wrong. Up close, Marcus saw everything. The same joint Mark had tested, the same bolt Caleb had ignored. He knelt down, pulling a small tool from his pocket, new but already worn from use. His fingers moved with quiet certainty, tightening, adjusting, checking the stability, not just once, but twice. Behind him, a small voice spoke. Is it broken? Marcus glanced back. A little girl stood there, no older than 6, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear slightly torn. Her hair was tied unevenly, her expression curious rather than afraid. Her name tag read Lily Carter. She had that open, unguarded look children have before the world teaches them to doubt. "No," Marcus said gently, "just making sure it stays safe." She nodded, as if that made perfect sense, because to her, it did. Marcus returned to his work, finishing the adjustment before standing. He reached into his bag and pulled out a new notebook. Clean pages, unmarked, waiting. For a brief moment, he held it in his hands. Then he opened it. The first line he wrote was simple. Date, time, section. But this time his hand didn't carry the same quiet need to prove something. It carried something else. Choice. Around him, the park slowly returned to its rhythm. But it was different now. Employees moved with more attention. Conversations were quieter. Even Tyler, watching from a distance, picked up a loose tool and set it properly aside without being told. Linda observed from across the path. She didn't interrupt, didn't direct. For the first time, she let the system run, not on control, but on understanding, because she finally knew what held it together. Not policies, not pressure, but the kind of care that no one could force. Marcus finished his entry, closing the notebook with a soft, final motion. Children laughed. The slide gleamed. The world continued. And this time, the balance held. And as the story fades into the quiet glow of an ordinary day, something deeper begins to whisper beneath it. Miracles are not always loud. Sometimes, a miracle is a person unseen, yet choosing to do what is right. A person overlooked, yet holding everything together. A person unloved enough, yet still living as if love exists. We often imagine God appearing in grand ways, light breaking through the sky, impossible moments that stop the world. But perhaps God moves more quietly than that, in people like Marcus, in patience when no one is watching, in responsibility when no one is asking, in choosing what is right, even when the world turns away. And maybe, in your life, there is someone like that. Or maybe that person is you, the one holding a family together in silence, the one trying every day without recognition, the one who keeps going, even when it hurts. If you've ever felt invisible, remember this: God does not overlook what is small. The world just takes longer to see what he already knows. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment. I believe in quiet strength. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. May God bless you in your strongest days and in the ones where you're simply trying to endure. And may you always carry that quiet light within you, no matter how loud the world becomes.
Not everything is what it seems, and it will only be beginning. If you want to see what happened, like, subscribe to Hidden Black Tale, leave like and share your truth below.